In this video, I'll use Maxine Tynes' poem Reach Out and Touch to review a couple recent concepts and lessons, and then we'll review the questions associated with this poem. So, Maxine Tynes, Reach Out and Touch. Baby girl, baby boy behind me on the bus. Reach out and touch the curly electric of my hair. Your fingers dipped in the brown skin magic of my neck to see if it comes off. Your mama slapping hands away, hush up of your questions, and wondering out loud why it doesn't come off. I turn and smile for you, but you're already lost in the silence and the fear that mother love wraps you in. I should have sat beside you, snugged up my big self up close, held you while your mama juggled parcels. Then you would know it's okay. So, after our first read through of this poem, we've read it through slowly. There's a couple, I don't know if you noticed when I was reading, there's a couple complex phrases in there. I found myself stumbling over, snugged up my big warm self up close. There's like a little repetition in there. There's some interesting phrases to work through. But before we get into any of that kind of structural stuff, our two most recent lessons were about imagery and figurative language. If we just start with some of the imagery of this, reading through this poem for the first time, what picture comes to mind? Like, what are you imagining reading this poem? Is there kind of a clear scene and setting? To me, I think it's being on a bus. Like the first line, there's a baby girl, there's a baby boy, there's a couple kids on this bus who reach out and touch the speaker. They touch her skin. The mother slaps their hand away. The speaker turns and smiles to these kids and has this feeling of like, I should have snuggled up beside you, and your mom's standing up juggling parcels. So if we're trying to like picture the moment and like, paint a picture of this, I don't know, I imagine like, I don't know, a morning commute or an afternoon commute on a busy bus, someone sitting maybe like in front of these kids and they reach over and are touching her. And the mother is maybe preoccupied, busy. She's standing there like the line juggling parcels. She's standing there with her hands full, maybe a little bit distracted. So at least these kind of two kids and a woman sitting down and the mother, all sitting maybe at like the back of the bus or the front of the bus. But it's just one kind of like moment on this bus. So if we have that picture in mind, if that's the image that's being created, next question we're supposed to work through is kind of the figurative language. Is there any metaphor in here? Is there any personification, simile? What did you notice? I think the ones that stood out to me are a couple phrases like curly electric hair. We don't usually use the word electric to describe hair. It's a metaphor. It's being applied to something where it doesn't totally apply. The magic of the neck. I think one that really stands out is this idea of being lost in silence and fear, and to be wrapped in silence and fear. That in this moment when the mother, maybe slaps their hands away and says, be quiet, hush up, these children are lost and wrapped within fear. So there's definitely a metaphor going on there. So we've got maybe a clear picture. We've worked through some of the imagery. We've started to recognize some of the figurative language. Let's go through the questions. So the first question is kind of like a technical structural question about capitalization. It says, so the absence of capitalizations. Maybe on your first read through, you notice that there's no capitals. I guess capital I is capitalized, but other than that, like the first letters, the last letters, they're not capitalized. So this absence of capitalization, what does that add to it? And it's saying, how does that help convey the speaker's attempt to be what? So part of this question is asking, like, what is the speaker, the person who's saying here, who's saying, you know what, I turn and smile for you. That person, they are attempting to be lazy and careless, unclear and disruptive, informal and familiar, loose and unplanned. So overall, like the person saying, I don't think the person on the bus who, had their neck touched and turned around and smiled at the kids, I don't think they're being disruptive. I don't think there's laziness or carelessness. I definitely think they're trying to be familiar. Like, hey, like they turn around and smile at these kids and like, it's okay. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to, that there's this informalness there. And I think the lowercase letters of all of those, maybe it's not the original intention, but it does continue to convey this kind of informal, comfortable, natural feeling that the speaker is conveying. So this one would be informal and familiar. Question 2 is about that first line, baby girl, baby boy behind me on the bus. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. It's a little bit of a tongue twister because it contains alliteration. The B, 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 B of baby, baby, boy, behind, bus. All of those start with the letter B. They start with that B sound. So that is alliteration. And like I said, it's a little bit of a tongue twister because of that. Question 3 asks about that language and technique. So that technique, alliteration, the use of using words, or excuse me, the use of words that start with a B, that technique, alliteration, what sense does it create? Does it make this first sentence feel hopeful? Does it make it feel dark? Does it make it feel kind of bouncy? Does that alliteration make it feel heavy? Think of all of those options. This alliteration, especially the fact it's the letter B, makes it a little lighter, a little bouncier, like baby boy, baby, or baby girl, baby boy behind me on the bus. There's like a lightness, a bounciness to that, especially like that repetition of the B sound. And I think it's intentional on the author's part. I assume, I don't think it's an accident that Maxine Tynes started her sentence with this kind of lighter, bouncy sentence that includes all of this alliteration. So question 3, bounciness. Question 4 asks about these few lines, your fingers dipped in the brown skin magic of my neck to see if it comes off. What does that suggest maybe about the speaker and the children? And this is one of those questions where there's kind of a few adjectives and a few words changed here. So is the speaker dismayed, surprised, impatient, or patient? So as we go, let's just focus on the speaker here. Let's start with the speaker. Is the speaker dismayed, surprised, impatient, or patient? I think especially that line, I turn and smile to you. I don't think they're dismayed. I don't think this upsets them. I think the speaker saying, I turn and smile to you, and, I should have just sat beside you to let you know it was okay. That person isn't dismayed, so we can cross that one off. They're maybe surprised. I don't think they're impatient. They seem very patient. So I'd just based on the first half of these, I'd either say speaker, being surprised, or patient. So for me, B and D, they might be switched for you. Then what about the children? Are the children in this moment like reaching over and touching? Are they being deceptive? Or are they being curious? Because if we've already narrowed it down for the speaker a little bit, we can just focus on B and D a little bit more. I think the children are being more curious than deceptive. I don't think they're trying to trick anyone or trick their mother. There's something, like she said, there's this like electricity about her, some sort of magic. Like the kids are curious and they're just wondering things. I think that word wondering especially connects to this idea of curiosity. So of these 4, I'd say the speaker seems very patient. The children seem curious, meaning for me, D. Again, maybe for you, it's a different letter, but same answer. Again, let's continue the other line. Your mama slapping your hands away. Hush up your questions. Return to the mother. We haven't talked about her a ton and her reaction. And this is her reaction. She slaps their hands away and says, like, hush up, and like, be quiet. Like, stop asking those questions. In there, I think this mother seems mostly embarrassed. Apathy would mean she's, doesn't care. If you're apathetic, you don't care. And I think she obviously cares. She turns around and smacks their hands and tells them to be quiet. And I think in this moment that I can assume, and I empathize with her sense of embarrassment. This is a difficult moment. These kids have put her in a very awkward situation. They've put the speaker of this poem in a very difficult situation. And so there's this understanding from the mother. Her reaction is to slap their hands and to say, hush up, most likely out of this embarrassment. That's maybe related to the kids wondering out loud, why doesn't it come off? And this idea, like we said, there's an innocence here. And I think the speaker recognizes it. It's, again, a very difficult, uncomfortable moment. It deals with issues of race and a lack of racial understanding. But at least judging by the speaker's reaction to turn and smile and to wish, like that they could have handled this moment in a more sensitive way than the mother handles it. I think she, the speaker, sees these kids. There's a certain innocence in what they're doing. It's not acceptable and it's not right. But she wishes I could have said, "Hey, it's okay. I'll smile," like that she could have handled it in a better way than the mother. Um, and maybe the speaker recognizes the innocence of these children. She doesn't see them as rude. She doesn't necessarily see them as irritated or that the children are tired. The speaker sees these children as being innocent. Question 7, this is that moment. So we saw the mother's reaction, smack hands away, be quiet. The speaker's reaction is to turn and smile at them, to reinforce her feeling that she's not particularly troubled in this moment. And even though, again, it's an awkward, difficult situation that this woman's been put in, she's understanding this curiosity. She's understanding of the innocence. Their mother, again, is maybe not as much, but the speaker has this reaction. She's less troubled. She's more understanding. And to this metaphor we talked about earlier, in the silence and fear, your mother love wraps you. And to be wrapped in silence, to be wrapped in fear, like we said, that would be a metaphor. It's not onomatopoeia because there's no sound. There's no bang or boom or clap. That's onomatopoeia. It's not a simile because there's no like or as. There's no comparison to say this is like this. The silence is like this or the fear is like this. That would be a simile. And it's not a hyperbole, even though we might say, well, it's exaggerated, right? Hyperbole is exaggeration. Hyperbole is when we exaggerate something, but we're not saying it's something different. To be wrapped in fear is to talk about fear like it's a blanket or it's like something that it can enclose you. That's saying it's something different. Hyperbole is exaggerating what's already there. To say there's more of it than there actually is. To say it's something else, that, it's this thing that can wrap around you. That's the metaphor. The phrase, again, the same one, this metaphor, the silence and fear your mother love wraps you in, that's alluding to the parental what? Like it's connecting to the parents' what? It suggests that this mother, what's it connected to? Her education, her absence, that she's not there. Well, she is there. She's maybe a step away juggling these parcels, but she is there. She's not patient. The speaker is patient. The mother is less patient. This is her discipline, though, that she's telling them to be quiet, and she's putting some sort of fear in them in this moment. She's not developing any sort of racial understanding. She's making it harder in a lot of ways through this discipline. The ending, the last, is it 4 lines here? What do they convey? Again, it's this ultimate understanding about the speaker. So the person who says, I should have sat beside you, snugged up my big warm self up close, held you while your mama juggled parcels, then you would know it's okay. What do these lines convey about the speaker? That they are empathetic, judgmental, creative, or strong, like they have fortitude. Throughout the poem, we've been emphasizing that this person is very understanding. Considering the situation they've been put in, they show a lot of empathy and understanding for these children. Overall, back to this idea about imagery, we talked about, there's this picture here, but what does it rely on the most to create the image, to create this moment, to paint this picture in your head? What sense is it relying on? Part of it, what we said, is all of the visual descriptions of the mother standing here, to the description of the bus in this moment, but also these descriptions of touch, like to look at something like my big warm self, like that warmth is conveying, like having someone slide up beside you, the feeling of like how that makes you feel a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. It's even in the title, reach out and touch. So more than anything, this poem uses imagery that connects to your sense of touch, to create your sense of sight, to kind of paint this picture. So that is Maxine Tynes' poem, Reach Out and Touch.